Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Go There on Fourth, a podcast about faith, football, and fantasy football. I'm Pastor Jason Barnett, a.k.a. the Dirt Path Pastor, and I am not a fantasy expert. I'm not even an NFL expert. I am just a pastor who loves football, and I'm sharing my journey of football with you and sharing a little bit of Jesus with you along the way. Each week, this is our Thursday edition. So Thursday, we're getting ready for Thursday night football. Ravens and Buccaneers, maybe a halfway decent matchup for Thursday night football. We finally got some offense last week, and now we may actually have a good game. Unbelievable. All right, but I'm going to make my weekly Week 8 picks for you, share those with you. I'm also going to share with you my fantasy football struggle for this week for my 1-6 team that don't be a suck-ups. Hopefully, we can get to 2-6, though. So let's jump right in for my Thursday night picks and my early Sunday game picks. So Thursday night, like I said, it's Ravens versus the Buccaneers. And keep in mind, I am 58-49 on the season, so at least I'm above 500. But let's see if I can do a little better than that. I had a rough week last week. I got absolutely demolished by my wife in picking games, and I was well below 500. So let's get back at least to 500, right? At least on the week. So Ravens versus Buccaneers. I'm picking the Ravens in this one. I hate picking against Tom Brady, especially with all the chatter about how bad the Bucs have looked. But the thing is, the Buccaneers are coming off of a short week, trying to solve their offensive problems, and also trying to get their defense ready to face Lamar Jackson. I know Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, have kind of been struggling a little bit, and late, especially late in games here recently. And I'm not sure what to think of the Ravens' defense. There's a good thing that the letter D is not in the word Ravens or Baltimore, because you would have to remove it. That's how bad their defense has been this season. But I'm picking the Ravens to win tonight against the Buccaneers. Second game, Broncos versus the Jaguars. One of the earliest football games I remember was John Elway and the Broncos facing off against the Jaguars, led by Mark Brunell in the playoffs. And it was an improbable upset by the Jaguars. I don't even remember what year it was, but I remember it's early in my football fandom when that game occurred. And I just remember being so shocked that Elway would lose to the upstart Jaguars. But anyway, Broncos versus Jaguars. I'm picking the Jaguars to win this one. What will be interesting to watch, though, is the Jaguars are 41% of third downs going against that Broncos defense, who are pretty much holding 30% on third downs defensively. So that's going to be the struggle. Can the Jaguars pick up first downs? They're either going to have to do it by getting them some really short yardage situations, by moving the ball on first and second down really well, or I might get this pick wrong. The Broncos defense is what scares me in this pick, but I'm still going with the Jaguars. I just don't think the Broncos have enough offense, and I don't think they're going to get it figured out this week. Bears versus the Cowboys. Picking the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys absolutely demolished last week on defense. Remember, they had the 5 sacks, I think it was, and they forced 5 turnovers last week. The Cowboys defense is a menace. They're a lot of fun to watch, though. So if you haven't had a chance to watch the Cowboys defense yet, I highly encourage you to give it a watch, because they are something. Now, whether the offense, we'll see how it does. The Bears defense is probably better than most people give them credit for, but I think the Cowboys will win this one. The Dolphins versus the Lions. Going with the Dolphins. Dolphins are finally back together, healthy for the most part. Going against, yes, the Lions' offense has been fire, at least at the beginning of the season. Last couple weeks they haven't looked so good. Which one week they're on a bye week, so you don't really look that great on your bye week because you're on a bye week. But they really struggled last week, but I don't think they have enough. I don't think they'll be able to keep with the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins' defense will do just enough to get them to win the game, but their offense, well, I think the offense finds a way to get things going. Cardinals versus the Vikings. I'm going with the Cardinals in this one. I've kind of been low on the Cardinals this season, kind of been betting against them, but man, I watched them play last week. I watched Murray go from an average-looking quarterback to a beast with the return of DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins will be playing again this week, which is a bad news for the Vikings defense. And the other thing you can remember, though, if you look at the Cowboys or the Vikings defense, the last quarterback that they played that was actually good, and I'm including Aaron Rodgers in that conversation, the last QB that they played that was actually good was Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts put up 333 yards and a touchdown against them. And remember, the Eagles beat the Vikings, and I think while the Cardinals aren't as good as the Eagles are, I think there's enough similarities to where I think the Vikings are going to have problems. And the other thing about this is the Cardinals have been doing a good job of getting to the opposing quarterback. The Vikings have allowed 17 sacks on the season, and the Cardinals have sacked the quarterback 16 times. So I think the Vikings are going to give up some sacks in this one, maybe force some turnovers from Kirk Cousins. So I'm picking the Cardinals over the Vikings in this one. Raiders versus the Saints. I'm going with the Saints. I like the Raiders. I think they're too talented of a team to be sitting with only 2 wins. The Saints are coming off a bad loss last week, and their defense is ranked 8th going against. The 8th ranked offense versus the 24th ranked defense. So the Saints, their offense is ranked 8th. As bad as they've played, they aren't the Saints offense that we're used to seeing. But how are you supposed to remain the same when you're missing Drew Brees and you're trying to replace him with Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston? Although I do think they look better with Andy Dalton, and I think it's a good move that they're going to stick with him at least for this week. At least that's what I had read so far. But the Raiders' defense has left a lot to be desired. Their defense has not been particularly strong, particularly good. Josh Jacobs has been a beast for them. That's really he's been the key to a lot of their wins so far, and then in their 2 wins this year. But again, that 8th ranked offense for the Saints is very impressive considering what's going on with their quarterback situation. All right, next up, Patriots versus the Jets. Man, this is one of those picks again I don't feel good about. I'm picking the Patriots over the Jets, even though the Jets are at home, even though the Jets have only lost twice. I know the Patriots have a lot of drama, and they got smoked last week by the Bears, but I'm just not brave enough to pick against Belichick and losing 2 in a row. And that second loss being to the Jets. It may come back to get me, the nostalgia factor in this, and relying on past knowledge. That's got me a few times so far this season. But again, I just don't see the Patriots losing 2 in a row, and especially the second one being to the Jets. Last up, Battle for Pennsylvania. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And I just feel like this is a very similar matchup for the Steelers as they had last week, going against the Dolphins. And although I think the Eagles have a slightly better defense than what the Dolphins have. And I really think Kenny Pickett is going to be the quarterback. He's going to be the guy for the Steelers moving forward. I think you saw flashes. You saw some good throws. But he's in kind of his rookie learning curve season. And he's going to struggle. And I think that's going to continue this week against the Eagles. So I'm picking the Eagles in this one. All right. Well, as I said, this is a Christian podcast about faith, football, and fantasy football. We talked about football here starting off. I want to share a brief devotional with you. And kind of as we dig into the devotional, I kind of want to share with you my own personal football career. As you can tell by looking at me, I am, for those that are watching the video, if you look at my body, I'm not a big, physically imposing guy, right? I'm kind of tall, right around 6'1", but there's not a lot of meat to me. I weigh right now 165 pounds. That's probably going to drop because I haven't been working out, and by working out, I haven't been running. For some reason, when I run, I gain weight. When I stop running, I lose weight. It makes no sense to me. But weight has always been a factor for me, and I haven't always been this tall. I really didn't hit my 6 foot height until later into high school. So I kind of quit playing football after my freshman year because all of a sudden the kids that were my size, or at least somewhat close, got a lot taller or a lot heavier than me. And all through middle school I played, and I even played some in Little League football. But again, I was maybe, I was less than 6 feet tall, and I maybe weighed 95 pounds soaking wet. So I wasn't a big, heavy guy. So you can imagine, because of my size, I spent a lot of especially my middle school career and my freshman football career, sitting on the bench. I rode the pine, refer to myself as a pine cowboy, right? I mean, I worked hard in practice. I wasn't one of those guys that got in there on the practice squad and slacked off. I tried to do my best and give my teammates the best look that I could. And I tried to play as hard as I could against them as I could, because that's how you help your teammates get better. But especially by my freshman year, it kind of just dawned on me that my career was going to be that of a pine cowboy, and I was most likely never going to make it in the NFL or even the college ranks as a player. There was a brief time where I flirted with the idea of coaching. I still consider that quite often, but my football career was that I was a pine cowboy. I just rode the bench, And that's not riding the bench is not the same as getting in the game. And I share that with you because the passage I'm reading this week is one where Jesus is going to kind of jump on the religious leaders, the chief priests and the elders when they come and talk to him. And to do that, I got to kind of share it's one passage, one section with you, but it's kind of covering two chunks of verses. And my Bible, which is the Christian Standard, kind of has it split up into two different sections, but the two sections really go together. That's really important to understand when we read our Bible. The original translators and the original writers, they didn't put these headings in there for us. Those have been inserted later. And so it's important to understand that these documents, these books of the Bible, were meant to be read in one sitting, not broken up into sections like we tend to do it. But because I only have so much time on a podcast and on a Sunday morning, that's why we give you sections at a time. All right, but I'm looking at Matthew chapter 21, verses 23 through 32. And kind of zero in here in the first section, which is 23 through 27. I'm just going to read it to you. It says, when Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority?" Jesus answered them, "I will also ask you one question, and if you answer it for me, then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Did John's baptism come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" They discussed it among themselves. And they said, "If we say from heaven, he'll say to us, then why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, we're afraid of the crowd because everyone considers John to be a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." So in this section right here, these religious leaders are coming to Jesus. They're trying to question his authority. By what authority do you have to be saying the things that you're saying and doing the things that you're doing? Who has commissioned you? And they're letting Jesus know, we as the religious authority, as the Jewish leaders of the temple, we have not given you permission to say these things. We've not given you permission to go out and do these things, these works that you're doing. You have no authority by us to minister. So by whose authority are you doing them? So they're questioning him. And as you can tell, Jesus very quickly turns it against them and realizes that they're not seeking genuinely. They're seeking because they're trying to trap Jesus and undermine who he is and what he's trying to do. They're trying to play politics with him. And so Jesus, that's why he turns it back on him and says, well, let me ask you this first and then I'll tell you by who I'm doing authority. And that's why then he says, well, who did John come doing all these things by? And they couldn't answer. They couldn't answer that question. And that kind of sets up verses 28 through 32. And Jesus is going to tell a little parable. And we're going to read that. That's where we're really going to focus. And what a parable is essentially a heavenly story with an earthly meaning. I got that backwards. It's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. That's better. He's taken something from everyday life that people would recognize and be able to grasp and understand, but apply it in a way that they would gain some knowledge of the kingdom or how God operates. So Jesus shares this story in response to the religious leaders coming at him. And so Jesus says, "What do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'My son, go work in the vineyard today.' The son answered, 'I don't want to,' but later he changed his mind and he went anyway. Then the man went to the other son and said the same thing. 'I will, sir,' the son answered, but that son didn't go. Which of the 2 did his father's will?' They said, 'The first,' they being the Pharisees or the religious leaders. Jesus said to them, 'Truly I tell you, tax collectors and prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God before you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you didn't believe him. Tax collectors and prostitutes did believe him, but when you saw it, didn't even change your minds then and believe him.'" So Jesus is outright condemning the chief priests and the elders by saying, hey, John the Baptist came to you, and you saw all the things that he was doing, but you refused to even entertain the thought. You wouldn't believe him, and you wouldn't believe him because you wouldn't even entertain the idea that you might be wrong. But these tax collectors and prostitutes, these people that were living lives of sin outside the will of God, when John the Baptist came to them, they understood the words that he was saying. They heard them, they changed their minds, and they believed John. The uneducated, those that you look down upon, believe John, but you won't. You educated people. Jesus is talking to these people. They know the scriptures. They know them inside and out. They knew the things they were supposed to be watching for, but when John was the one that came and did it, John didn't fit the description of what they were hoping to see, and it didn't fit their interpretation, even though it was what was happening. And so they refused to change their mind, consider being wrong, and they refused to believe John because of it. Jesus is essentially saying the tax collectors and the prostitutes got in the game, but you guys didn't. You all were pine cowboys. And so that's the meaning I want to take and apply to us from this passage that we're looking at. You see, everyone is invited to follow Jesus. That was the purpose of Jesus' death on the cross. We all are sinful and fallen short of the glory of God. But Jesus paid the debt for our sin. He paid the penalty of sin. He was the atonement for all sin, for everyone, for all time's sake. Meaning every one of us has been given a way to God to be in right relationship with God, and that's through the blood of Jesus. And we accept that gift of God that leads to eternal life by changing our minds and believing in Jesus. Believing in Jesus, the fact that Jesus said he was the Messiah, believing in the fact that Jesus is the one who died for our sins. And part of that changing mind is recognizing that we are sinners in need of that. So every one of us is invited to follow Jesus, and a change of mind and belief in Jesus is the requirements for that. That's it. It's that simple. But while everyone is invited to be a follower of Jesus, I want it to be known that there is not one single Christian, there is no one who follows Jesus who is invited to follow Jesus but to come sit and be a pine cowboy. Jesus has not called all of us to follow him to stand along on the sidelines. No, every one of us, Jesus has called to follow him with the intentions that we are supposed to get into the game. Really what Jesus is getting after by pointing out to the Pharisees, these religious leaders, he won't call them Pharisees, but they're not Pharisees, they're the elders and the chief priests. Some of them may be Pharisees and some of them might have been Sadducees, who knows. But these religious leaders, Jesus is pointing out to them that the tax collectors and the prostitutes figured it out, they got it, and they're going to enter the kingdom before you. He's saying the outcasts of society are going to enter God's kingdom before any of you because you guys are the ones sitting on the sideline refusing to get into the game. Despite having all the evidence, having all the knowledge, you refused to live a life and to accept it and live the life that you said. But these sinners, these silent sinners, these outcasts, these prostitutes, these tax collectors, they figured it out through faith, and now they are living it out. And because they're living it out, because they've gotten into the game, they're going to enter the kingdom before you. And that's the truth for every one of us as Christians. We can call ourselves Christians all we want. We can go to church all we want. We can read our Bible as much as we want. But until that theology becomes practical, until it becomes the way we live our lives in love to God by loving others in our lives, by showing kindness to people, by pointing others to Jesus, but in ways that encourage them, ways that are through mercy and gentleness, ways that are inviting people to Jesus rather than just pointing out their sin. Until we do that, we're no different than these religious leaders. They have all the knowledge, but they're refusing to get in the game. Matter of fact, they're trying to sabotage the game. They're trying to stop the game from happening. But if you and I are truly followers of Jesus, then we have to stop being a pine cowboy. We have to find a way to get involved in the game. And some of us, God's going to call to preach. That's what God's called me to do. Some of you, God might call to be a Sunday school teacher. Some of you, God might just call you to be an electrician that loves Jesus and does your best to support your church and to support the growing kingdom of God by inviting others and being a positive influence for others. There's all kinds of ways to get stop being a pine cowboy and demonstrate your faith. But the most important way, the most influential way, is by demonstrating the love of Christ in your heart to the people you interact with each and every day. Well, if you appreciated that devotional, I encourage you to check out ravnaz.com. That's the website for the Ravenna Church of the Nazarene, where I serve as the pastor. We have services every Sunday at 11 a.m. We'd love for you to have us. We're located at 530 Main Street here in Ravenna, Kentucky, in beautiful Estill County. If you can't join us in person, you live too far away, you can catch our services being live streamed on our Facebook page, or you can also catch the sermon on the Dirt Past Sermon podcast. We'd love to have you. You're always invited to worship with us. All right, let's continue on with our game picks. My late Sunday afternoon picks. Here we go. There's only 4 of them this week. Titans versus the Texans. I'm going with the Titans here. I know the Titans offense hasn't looked good. And the only reason they beat the Colts last week was the Colts offense looked worse. But I just don't think the Texans have enough to pull a win off here. I think the Titans are going to win this one, even though it's in Houston. But I think the Titans pull a win. Commanders versus the Colts. And Ellinger, we need, as a Colts fan, if you're watching this for somehow this podcast makes it to your attention, Ellinger, we need you to be the plunger to unclog this season or to help us flush it, one way or the other. I'm hoping that you're the plunger to help us unclog and get this thing back rolling again. But I'm picking my Colts. I know, I'm a Colts fan. I bleed Colts blue. I will always pick the Colts, no matter who they're playing against, no matter how great the odds are against them. But I'm picking the Colts versus the Commanders. And this time, I don't think it's so far-fetched. Again, the Colts defense has not been the problem. Their defense has been playing pretty much outstanding all season long. It's just hard to play good, solid defense when your offense is struggling that much. And so I'm hoping Ellinger will be the shot in the arm. I don't think he's going to come in and become the next MVP. But I think, his time spent in playing for the Texas Longhorns as the starter, if you go and look at his college stats, they're pretty good. Playing at a major college institution, right, the Texas Longhorns. I think he's going to come in. I think he's going to do just fine. I think he's going to make some plays for us and help get the offense kind of back on track. So Colts now. 49ers versus the Rams. I really think this one's going to be a slugfest. We have 2 great defenses. We have Matthew Stafford, who is doing his best to throw as many passes to the other team as he can. We have Jimmy Garoppolo, who's decided that's a good life pattern to adopt as a quarterback. I know that the 49ers have McCaffrey. I'm not sure how he's going to be used. I'm not sure how effective he'll be used. Again, this is only the second week with the team. First full week with them in practice and in the system. In some ways, I kind of expect this one to be very similar to the old school Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Baltimore Ravens games, back when they had the 2, monster defenses, and it was just this brutal, grind them out, smash mouth game. And I feel like this one has the potential of that, only with maybe a little bit modern flair and with less black and gold and purple and black involved. So, picking the 49ers over the Rams, though. I just think the 49ers have a little bit more going for them. I'm just not sold on the Rams this year. I'm not even sure the Rams are a playoff team. So, next up, Giants versus the Fighting Genos. And by the Fighting Genos, I mean the Seattle Seahawks. And I'm going with the Genos. This one's at Seattle. I know the Giants have only lost once, but I think this is where they lose the second one. I think the Pete Carroll's going to have the Genos helping them figure out a way to get it done defensively. And Seattle is a tough place to go and play for opposing teams. And I think that will prove the case this time for the Giants. All right, time for my team struggles. I'm going to share with you how my team is struggling, or my struggles in getting my lineup set for this week. I'm in a 12-team PPR league with some custom scoring. We get points for targets, points for completions, points for carries, things like that to kind of boost the scoring. You have to do that. I kind of like to do that a little bit when you have a 12-team league, and let's face it, by this time in the season with bye weeks going on, and if you're in a league where people halfway know what they're doing, your free agency is kind of a ghost town. So you need to help boost scoring in some ways to keep people entertained and give them some feeling of hope. And that's kind of why I changed the scoring a little bit. But I'm in it with some church folks and friends. Unfortunately, my team is 1-6 in the season. I think it's because I named my team after my kicker, Ryan Suckup. So we're called the Don't Be a Suckup, and that's exactly what we're doing. Maybe it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. So at this point in the season, I'm just playing for the love of the game. Right, I have nothing left but to play for pride, at least a little bit of pride that I have left. So that's where I'm at right now. My hope is just to ruin hope for somebody else. Even though it's out of the 12 teams, 7 of them make the playoffs. If the best team gets a bye, I'm most likely going to end up in the bottom 5. My hope is maybe I can get to the top of the bottom 5. So anyway, at quarterback. Last week, if you remember, I ran with Matt Ryan at quarterback. Well, obviously, I had to make a change because I can't roll with Matt Ryan now. Especially one with the shoulder being hurt. The other, Ellinger's been named the starter for the remainder of the season. Hopefully, that remains true as a Colts fan. But for fantasy football's sake, that kind of hurts. But I've been rolling it with Derek Carr up until last week. And I took Derek... I can't remember I think Derek Carr was on a bye last week. That might have been the main reason why I took him out. But I also felt like Matt Ryan, he was consistently scoring points, even though he had all the turnovers and all those things. But I'm going back to Derek Carr. I am concerned, though. I am concerned with Derek Carr because they're going against the Saints. And that defense has created a lot of sacks and turnovers. And that's one thing Derek Carr has been a little prone to. Matter of fact, he would have had a bad fumble against the Chiefs had they not ruled that awful passing the interference or the roughing the passer call that I'm sure Chiefs fans, if they were watching this or listening, they will immediately bemoan it and start being upset and randomly yelling again. Chiefs fans, is okay if that's what you need to do to get the anger out. It's not good for you to hold on to the anger. Let it go. Let it out. But with that being said, I'm nervous with Derek Carr in the lineup, but he's better than I feel like just about anything that there's left in the free agents market. Jared Goff is out there in our league, but I'm not quite confident in picking him. His numbers look kind of rough the last couple of weeks. All right, running back one, I have another big problem. That's mainly because Austin Eckler is on bye week, and he's been a monster. He's finally coming alive, playing well, and not just in the run game, but in the passing game. He's become a bit of a touchdown machine that we've all hoped he would be this season. But I'm in a dilemma because he's out, so it's going to hurt. I have some options. I have Michael Carter on my bench, and he's going against the Patriots. But it's not a great matchup. But Hall going down has to add value to Michael Carter, and Michael Carter has been a decent play even with Hall in the lineup. So that is a strong possibility. The other option I have is free agency, and I did find Deontay Freeman in free agency in our league, so I do have him on the bench. So that's an option there. But we'll see what I do. I'm leaning towards going with Michael Carter at this point. My running back two is I have Jamal Williams of the Lions. He's going against the Dolphins, and again, this is kind of a dilemma. Swift is back, but even with Swift in the lineup, Williams is still getting about 20 points per game in our league. And my other options, I'm not so sure, but I do have James Conner, and he's going against the Vikings. But James Conner still has that big ugly Q next to his game, and he was questionable all last week before being ruled out before the start of Sunday games. And another thing is I might need James Conner at my flex. Again, with bye weeks rolling in, I'm kind of limited in what's available in my current roster. And so then, again, I'm back to free agency. Can I find something in free agency that will be able to fill in the gap at least for a week? I'm not really sure what that is. But right now, I'm most likely going to roll with Jamal Williams because of lack of other options. My receiver one is Tyreek Hill, and I am super, super excited about this one. Makes me so happy because Hill is going against the Detroit Lions. I know the matchup doesn't necessarily look good as far as opponent ranking versus Hill, but man, the Lions defense hasn't stopped anybody all season, and good defense has struggled containing Tyreek Hill, and now he and Waddle both are going against a lesser defense. So I am excited about this matchup. I think this one has a potential to be a game-saving, game-breaking, game-important matchup for me. Receiver 2, I have Deontay Johnson of the Steelers in. Again, this is another matchup. I'm not crazy about this matchup against the Eagles. But the thing is, Deontay Johnson has all these targets and no touchdowns yet. At some point, the odds are in his favor. He's one of these targets and some of these catches that he's getting is going to lead to a touchdown, to a big breakout game. And it's coming. I think it's worth hanging on to him. Tight end, I have Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz. I don't have Dalton Schultz. I have Dalton Schultz, the tight end for the Cowboys. He's going against the Bears this week, and I am concerned because the Bears defense is ranked 5th against opposing tight ends. And I'm also concerned because I did just notice today that the big red ugly Q is next to Schultz's name again. He's been dealing with a knee injury kind of all season. But if he is able to go, he is kind of Prescott's safety blanket. And we all know how we are with our safety blanket. We snuggle it. We use it because we feel safe with our safety blanket. So I'm gonna hold on to Schultz unless he ends up getting ruled out, I think. Or maybe I get lucky and find something out for his free agency. At flex right now, I'm rolling with James Conner in the flex spot. I mentioned that I was probably going to have to use him at flex when I was talking about my running back situation. But James Conner is going against the Vikings. And And it's an early Sunday game, so I'm going to have to be paying a lot of attention up until, as a pastor, I preach Sunday mornings, and I'm usually, even though I'm done preaching by about 12:30, somewhere in there, my congregation will probably tell you closer to 12:30, I'm usually still trying to get out of the church building before the early games start. And so I don't usually have a lot of time to make those quick adjustments like that. And I've never once tried to do it from the pulpit. I'm not sure how people would respond. Although maybe during my dramatic pauses as I'm preaching the sermon, my dramatic pause will actually be changing my life. I'm just kidding, I won't do that. But I do need to kind of have a plan. I'll probably make a final decision sometime Saturday night. But right now I have James Conner in the flex. My other option is I did pick up Paris Campbell this week as an insurance policy for receiver. Again, I'm not anxious to put anybody from the Colts in the starting lineup yet because Ellinger still has a lot to prove. In fact, I did pick up Ellinger too and stashed him on the bench for now. But Campbell is kind of an insurance policy. He would be a big gamble, but again, I also still have Deontay Freeman. And again, with Hubbard being questionable, although I've been hearing reports Hubbard most likely will play, and so they will be splitting carries most likely. But again, that didn't seem to impact either one of them too much in last week's game. So that is another option there. For defense, I decided to roll another week with the Dolphins. Usually I stream based on matchups. And the reason why I'm rolling with the Dolphins, again, they're facing the Lions. And so far this season, the Lions have only allowed one game where they didn't give up a sack, and there's only been one other game when they didn't have a turnover of some sort, and those were not the same game. So again, turnovers and sacks are huge points getters for defenses in fantasy football. So I feel like there's a lot of upside with the Dolphins, especially going against the Lions offense. All right, and then for my kicker, remember I told you that my team name was named after my kicker. Right? Don't be a suck-ups. And we've been being a suck-up. And no one's been more disappointing than the Buccaneers offense, which has hindered suck-ups' reliability as a point getter as a kicker. So I finally did it. I replaced him. I cut suck-up this week, and I picked up Jason Myers on the Seahawks. There's only been one game this season when Myers has scored under double-digit points as a kicker. So I feel like that's a big boost at least a small boost in the scoring. At least the consistency in getting double points there, or double-digit points from someone. But now my dilemma is, do I remain with the same team name, or do I change it? Right? Maybe the team name's been the curse that I've placed upon myself. Do I break the curse by changing it, or do I roll with it? Right now I'm leaning toward rolling with it because I don't like change. All right, so that's where I'm at with my fantasy football team this week. Where are you at with yours? I'd love to hear. Just send me a message on Facebook or whatever social media app you found this podcast on. Please mention in the comments, or you can go to dirtpastormanpodcast.com and use the contact page there. If you have questions and would like me, you want to wrestle with them with me, or share some maybe your tidbits of wisdom with me, I'd love to hear from you. I'm up against Pastor Andy. If you remember Pastor Andy Newman, he was our guest with us a few weeks back. I'm up against him. He's got a 3-4 record. And he did just pick up Deebo Samuel this week. He traded Swift to pick up Deebo. And the sad thing is I'm the league manager, and I could have stopped it from happening, but I didn't. But he's 3-4, and he's up against my 1-6 squad. That's named for a kicker no longer on my roster. But perhaps this is the turning point, or maybe I can get on a bit of a roll. We'll see. Right now I'm not projected to win, but we all know how projections go. All right, picks for prime time. These are the prime time matchups for Week 8. Packers versus the Bills. I'm going with the Bills. Even though Aaron Rodgers talked about how now the Packers are in a good spot because people will be counting them out. We're counting them out because the Packers are going to be out of the playoffs because they're not a playoff team. So I'm going with the Bills on that one. Bengals versus the Browns. I am so excited to get more of Jacoby Brissett and the Browns in prime time. That was some sarcasm. I'm laid it on pretty thick there. But I'm going with the Bengals in this one. It is always good to see the Bengals in prime time, though. They're fun to watch, especially right now with Joe Burrows and Jamar Chase rolling. Now, this one may be closer than expected because it is a divisional matchup, and I don't think the Browns are necessarily... Well, yeah, the Browns are the worst team in that division still, and that's counting with Kenny Pickett, starting quarterback for the Steelers. But I'm picking the Bengals to pick that win up there. All right, it's time for my bye week Batmans. These are players that can help you. You can shine the back signal, and they will be the heroes for their lineups. But I'm also going to warn you about the jokers that you could pick up that will make you look foolish. And just so you're aware, Chiefs and Chargers are on byes this week. I finally get Keenan Allen back off injury for 1 week. He puts up 3 points, and then he goes on a bye week. But good thing I didn't have him in the lineup last week when he came back. But anyway, so these are players I think can help you, or players to be cautious of. And I'm basing this off of players that are available in my free agency, and they most likely will be available in yours too, based on the percentage of how they're owned on rosters. With that being said, I'm going to jump right in with quarterback. Quarterback, do not go with Justin Fields. Do not. I'm not sure why you would consider it. And if you are considering, it's because the fields of flowers you walked through were not flowers. You got high off something and your thinking has been impacted by it. Remember, Scripture tells us to be sober-minded, especially when we're playing fantasy football. You've got to be sober-minded when you make decisions. And this one is not a sober-minded decision. Justin Fields is a quarterback you don't want to use in your fantasy. He's a football joker. This week, though, the Batman, the quarterback that could save you is Taylor Heineke. Yes, I know the Colts defense is stingy. Yes, but for some reason, no-name quarterbacks are a kryptonite to whoever the Colts defense is. In my lifetime watching the Colts, whenever they've gone up against a no-name quarterback, for some reason, he ends up being the thorn in the flesh of that week. So, as a Colts fan, I think Tyler Heineke has a chance to have a big week fantasy football-wise. If you're looking to replace a quarterback, he may be an option for you this week. Running back, do not pick up Kenyon Drake. This will be like stepping on a rake. Remember, Gus Edwards is back. And did you see what Gus Edwards did last week? Yeah. I think Edwards is probably going to be the favorite guy, even though he's questionable too this week. Kenyon Drake, do not pick him up. It's not worth the risk. Although a guy I think it's worth it is Deontay Freeman. Yes, Hubbard is questionable and expected to play. But they're going against Atlanta. They're going to have to run the ball. And even if Hubbard does play, he's still banged up, right? So he may not be as effective as Foreman, who is healthy and playing well. So Foreman is a running back I would definitely consider looking at. Receivers, do not go with Redmond, the receiver, for the Lions. Do not go with Raymond, because if you go with Raymond as they're going against the Dolphins, you will be investing in Ray-Bans to wear sunglasses so people can't see your eyes and see that you've been crying because your team lost because you picked up Raymond from the Lions. I know he had a big game last week, but be sure to go look at the game log, right, of his games this season. Yes, he had a big game last week. Yes, he's been getting consistently about 5 targets a game. But last week was kind of the anomaly of the season so far. You need to see a little bit more for him consistency-wise before you make that move. But the receiver I do think you can pick up, I do think you pick up Darius Slayton. Yes, Darius Slayton and the Giants are going against the Genos, who are ranked number 5 against opposing receivers. But I like this matchup because if the Giants can run the ball well, and that's what the Giants do really well, that's run the ball, it's going to open up throwing lanes. Do I think Slayton's going to get you a ton of yards? No, because Daniel Jones is not going to get you a ton of passing yards. But the touchdown threat increases. And that's what you're after. So, Darius Slayton, someone worth considering. Joker, at tight end, right? This is a tight end. Do not go with Greg. Do not go with Greg. I can't even say it. His last name starts with D. Delucic. Yeah, that's probably wrong. But do not go with him. And the number one reason why is it's the Broncos offense. If you're still believing in the Broncos offense, that means you're a Broncos fan. I don't believe in the Broncos offense. I don't trust them. Not at this point in the fantasy football season. So don't go with him. But who you should go with is Juwan Johnson. Jawan Johnson and the New Orleans Saints. He is worth giving consideration if you have a tight end on bye week this week. The reason being is there's only one tight end so far this season that has scored less than 10 points against the Raiders, and that's who the Saints are playing. And the only tight end to score less than 10 points against the Raiders was the tight end for the Broncos, who have a terrible offense. The Saints have the 8th best ranked offense. So I would strongly give Jawan Johnson some considerations. All right, like I said, if you have any faith or football questions, please send them to me. I'd love to hear from you. Be sure to check out the Dirt Path Sermon Podcast. It's available on all the podcasting of it. It's my weekly sermon from here at Ravenna Church of the Nazarene. You can catch it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, anywhere it can be found. But also the Dirt Path Sermon Podcast.com. Be sure to follow me on TikTok. I'm the Dirt Path Pastor on there. I share daily devotional videos. And do me one other favor. Please consider becoming a member of the show and support the show by clicking the link in the show notes that says support the show. And that'll take you to our my Patreon page. And I would love to have you support it. There's some other things there that you can get access to by becoming a member. All right, have a happy fantasy football.